One of the harder parts about being in private practice, especially if you're in those growth phases of private practice, and especially for those people that are in solo private practice, is that it can get kind of lonely. One of the things that you might be struggling with is just knowing how to get more referrals and more clients in your door. Or it might be that you're on the other end of the spectrum and you've got the clients that you need, but you're just being overwhelmed by all the processes and systems that you need to have in place to make that go smoothly. One of the best ways to get through those growth phases of private practice is to have a group of trusted colleagues that you can bounce things off of. And that's exactly what a mastermind group does, is it gives you a group of trusted friends and colleagues that you can bounce things off of and brainstorm with and come up with new ideas on how to manage your practice more efficiently and make it more profitable. So I'd like to invite you to join the mastermind group that I'm starting for September of 2018. And all you need to do is go over to practiceoftherapy.com/mastermind and apply today. This is the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. This is session number 47 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Hello, folks. I'm Gordon Brewer, and I'm so glad you have joined me here at the Practice of Therapy podcast. If this is the first time for listening in, welcome, and I hope you will come back and listen to some other episodes. You've got 46 others that you can listen to here. So I hope you'll take a look at those and listen in. And if you're back again after listening to other podcasts, I'm so glad you've decided to follow me. And if you are following for the first time, I would ask you to go over and subscribe. It just helps you get the latest podcast episodes and also helps boost our ratings and helps other people find the information here. And as always, I really hope that this information is helpful for you and that you find this podcast worthwhile. Here where I live in Northeast Tennessee, for those of you who have listened before, it's really a beautiful part of the country, and it's very much an Appalachian area. And I will tell you this, it's pronounced Appalachian, not Appalachian. And if you don't say it right, I'll throw an Appalachia. So it's Appalachian. Just remember that. Anyway, I digress. But anyway, here in the Tri-Cities of Northeast Tennessee, there's a big event going on this weekend. If you're a NASCAR fan, you probably know about this event. It's the Bristol race. It's the night race, and it's a huge to-do here. I'm not actually going to the race. I think my daughter's got tickets with a friend to go to the race. But anyway, it's a big deal, and the whole town changes here, and we're full of people, and lots of big doings going on around race night at the Bristol Motor Speedway. But anyway, I digress on that. But today I am so happy to have as my guest Kasey Compton. And Kasey has been a delight to get to know. Kasey and I have communicated a good bit through several of the Facebook groups that we're involved in. And Kasey is, but she wouldn't say this of herself, but she's a bit of a rock star in private practice. Kasey has built $1 million private practice, and she's done it in just 3 years. And it's just amazing to see what she has done and the culture that she has created in her practice. And I have learned so much from Kasey just through our chats on Facebook, but also in listening to some of her other podcast episodes, particularly over at Joe Sanok's Practice of the Practice podcast. He's got several series there with her. And one of the things that, I know I mentioned mastermind groups at the beginning of this, but Kasey is going to be doing another mastermind group with Joe Sanok, and I'll put that information in the show notes. But the thing about Kasey, really her superpower, if you will, that enabled her to build the size practice that she has, was in being able to create the systems and processes needed to do that. And she is very detailed in that, and we'll talk a little bit about that in today's podcast. But so, without further ado, here is Kasey Compton. Well, hello, folks. Welcome again to the Practice of Therapy podcast. And I am so excited to have Kasey Compton with me today. Kasey and I have been in, I guess you would say, Kasey, parallel mastermind groups together. But also, as I told her before we started recording, I've been kind of podcast stalking her a little bit and listening to some of the different podcasts that she's been a guest on. But Kasey, I'm so glad to have you.
Thank you so much. When I got your email about being on your podcast, I was really excited because I had heard a lot about you. So I'm really excited to be here. Oh,
well, great. And I've heard, and mutually so for me. I mean, we're in several Facebook groups together, and so I think you and I have had conversations, via Facebook groups, and it's just been a lot of fun. I have another little confession here, Kasey. I started thinking about the fact that I was going to be recording you, I guess Wednesday night. And I lost sleep over this. I just, just because I was so excited to be able to talk with you about what you've done in your practice and all of that. So tell folks a little bit more about you and kind of where you've landed in your private practice journey.
Okay. So my private practice officially started in October of 2015. It was a long time coming. It was something that I knew even when I started grad school that was something I was going to do. And so I started actually in private practice as soon as I graduated from grad school, and realized after about 2 clients that I was not ready. Uh-huh. So I gave it up and went back into some agency work, and I learned and just tried to get my bearings and get my feet under me. And when I felt like I was ready again, I just took the plunge. And so in October of 2015, we officially registered our practice, and started really small and just started with me and another person. And, kind of one of my biggest, I don't know if you want to call it a fear, but just something that I've been very aware of since the beginning was needing to have residual income. So needing to make money, even if I personally could not provide the service. And, as clinicians, I think we have so much opportunity to do really well and to provide a good life for our family, but it solely depends on us. And
right.
Yeah. So if we get sick, or if we have a baby, or, when life happens, what do you do? And so going into it, that was always in the back of my mind. And at the time I had a business partner, and we were both kind of in our own little private practices together. And I said, hey, I really think we just need to form a group because, it's just too risky for me to do this by myself forever. I want to make sure that I can make money even if I can't practice. And
right.
Yeah, she was a little hesitant. She was like, I don't really know. I don't really know about that. But needless to say, we did it anyway. And we started with the 2 of us. We hired 1 clinician and made that the best clinician that we could possibly find. And she really helped form a very strong foundation to what we were were laying. And it just kind of took off from there. We went from her, and I can't remember the numbers exactly, but we probably had 10 maybe by the first year. And then it just kind of grew from there. So now we're about 3 years in. October of this year will be our 3rd year, and I believe we have 80 staff members at this point.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's incredible. It just blows my mind.
Yeah. It wasn't really ever planned. I mean, I knew I wanted to scale, but at a certain point, I just thought, I'm going to get all of these systems in place. I'm going to make sure all my processes are clean and lean, and we're just going to see what happens. And I just really saw a difference whenever things were very uniform and streamlined, that when we added new staff, none of us ever really felt it. It didn't feel like we were having to do any more work. And
wow.
yeah, so that was the goal, and it just kind of happened a little faster than what I figured it would.
Right. Yeah, so that's as I told you before we started recording, that's the part that is just the most intriguing to me, is the systems and the things that you've got in place. I know for me, I know as I've built my practice, I like to describe it as I've built the airplane as we fly it, and it's yeah. It's so, but for you, it sounds like you really put a lot of time and effort on the front end, just developing those systems. So, can you kind of walk us through that process of how you decided what systems to put in place, and like the onboarding process and all of that?
Yeah, that's kind of a loaded question, but
yeah.
Okay. So I came from a very I'm just a very analytical person in general. So I think that helped me a little bit, and I'm kind of a process person in general. I want to know the steps of, how can we make this faster? How can we make this more efficient? How can we make this more effective? So I just have that anyway. But the couple of companies that I worked for prior to private practice taught me a lot, because not that they were really doing things the way I would do them, but they were doing things, and I saw different, just by working through their processes, I learned what I liked and what I didn't. And so I just already kind of knew how I wanted things to run and what kind of experience I wanted our clients to have. And so I did do a lot on the front end, but I think inevitably you have to build the airplane as you fly, because your practice is your practice, and what works for me is not, I couldn't just give to you and it just work for you.
Right.
Yeah. It just doesn't work that way. But
yeah.
I think just kind of knowing what you're up against before you get there is a good thing. I didn't have anyone to tell me what I was going to be up against, so a lot of my stuff kind of just had to happen. It, like you mentioned, the onboarding. I know for me, just being the kind of personality I have, and I tease Joe about this sometimes, because he's just like, let's do it. And I'm like, okay, well, hold on a minute. What's this going to look like? So I know we have clinicians on both sides, and we wanted to make sure that no matter what their preferences were, that they felt comfortable and happy and onboarded in a good way. And so just thinking about potential barriers or potential problems that we could have, and then going ahead and building a system to overcome that is kind of how I have done it.
Yeah. And I know one of the things that I, just have learned from you, again, from listening to you on other podcasts, is that one of the things that's real important in building something like you've got is making sure that you've got the culture within your group that really helps, I guess, maintain what you've got.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, that is a lesson that I learned the hard way. I think I tend to be a little more high strung. And so when we started the group, my business partner at the time was like 10 times more high strung than I was. So without even realizing it, we were creating a culture that was very difficult to be a part of if you didn't have that personality. And it took about a year to realize that, and to know, like, hey, this isn't what we want. This is not how we want this to feel. And so I think it's funny, because now 3 years later, a lot of the people that we hired in year one that left and quit in year one have now come back to Mindsight as new employees, and they've both been like, what has changed? Like, it's so different.
Yeah.
And that's just like the best compliment ever, because the culture is key. And I think knowing what you want your culture to be and then hiring people that match that is really probably the best advice I could give someone. And it sounds so simple and silly, but it is so true.
Right. Yeah, and I think the thing that is too that I would guess for you, Kasey, is that you've had to learn how to do a lot more delegating. I know one of the things that I'm really guilty of is I tend to bootstrap too much, and I tend to try to do it all myself. Mm-hmm. What was that like for you to be able to start to hand stuff off and being able to delegate? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's definitely a weakness of mine. I think I just wrote a blog last night, actually, and I haven't posted it yet, but it's kind of around that topic. Was in the beginning, this business meant everything to me, and where I had been in private practice, and I was really the only one responsible for my clients' care, and I knew I wasn't going to let them down. So I knew the quality, if I was providing the service, was going to be what I wanted it to be. Mm-hmm. So then when you start to scale and you start to have clinicians that are providing services, you just kind of start to have to relinquish that control and hope that they do well. And I think as we have grown, I have learned how to hire differently, and I have different standards and expectations of the people that I do hire, which has helped me to feel more confident in handing things over to them. And then also just getting rid of that negative thought that if I screw this up, I'm done. Or if I screw this up, it means the business falls apart, because we screw things up every day and the business does not fall apart. So I think now I just have a better sense of understanding that, yeah, we can mess something up and it's not that big of a deal. We'll just fix it and go on. So right. I would say that's probably the biggest mental shift for me.
Yeah. I think that's, as our friend Joe Sanok says, we could be petrified by perfection. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, and I think just sometimes you have to just get in there. Well, I think it's always good to have a plan, but then you've got to execute the plan.
Yeah.
Sometimes the execution of the plan is the hardest part or the scariest part, rather.
Yeah, it is. And I think I've noticed this in some of my employees, and it's interesting because that used to be me. And I've got some employees that will plan to work for days before they actually do anything. And now that, because I know I used to do that, I would come up with this big, huge plan and have it all laid out, and it would take me weeks before I actually started the project. And I think Joe probably has dropped off on me a little bit in that respect. Just do it and then figure the rest of it out later.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there's reasons that you would not want to do that. Like, I don't necessarily think you should just do a practice and then figure the rest out later, because you're going to lose your mind. But with certain things, I think that that's very much appropriate.
Right. Yeah. So did you ever dream that you would have something the size that you've got?
Man, that's so hard. Honestly, I never really thought about that. I didn't. I thought that I knew what I wanted. I knew I wanted a company that provided quality care to the people in our community. And I knew that I wanted a company that provided quality, how do I explain that? Okay, so I have worked for companies in the past that no matter what I did to prove myself, it was never enough. Like, nobody ever said, okay, go ahead and do that. Or if I had an idea, they would be like, no, that'll never work. No, that'll never work. So I wanted to have an environment that if someone had a strength or someone had a passion, let's get behind that and let's support them. And so that's, those are really the only two things that I've focused on. And I think the size of my company is just a result of that. It was never like I'm going to have 100 employees in 3 years. Just never thought about it that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So as you've grown, I know one of the things that I think a lot of people maybe think about is just I guess maybe in a way, the logistics of, okay, where if I move into group practice, I'm going to have a bigger space. And I know that's just been in the conversations we've had within the mastermind groups. Should I get a bigger building? Should I, is it time for me to hire somebody new? And all of those questions, just kind of that. So how did you overcome kind of some of those kinds of questions? Mm-hmm. Does that question make sense?
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. Okay, that was definitely a learning experience, and I'm very much a numbers person. I love numbers, facts, figures, data, all of that. So I kind of came up with a set of formulas that would help me make those decisions, and that's one of the things. Whenever I wrote an ebook, it's like a 27-page book. It's not a huge book, but it outlines some of the financial metrics that people really should look at that maybe don't. I've talked to a lot of consulting clients that are just very overwhelmed and like avoiding their numbers. And then when we get in there and start just doing some simple math, it's like a relief, or a weight has been lifted off of them. Mm-hmm. So like as far as deciding when to employ or when to hire another person, if it's support staff, I kind of have a formula that I use on, okay, so when you have a group insurance-based practice, I tell people this all the time. Mm-hmm. You have to be good at managing your cash flow, because there's a component of an insurance-based practice that you have no control over, and that's the insurance company.
Right.
Yeah. So if they decide that they're going to hold your payments for 60 days and you're used to them only waiting 14, if you don't have a good cash flow management system, you're going to be hurting come payroll mm-hmm. time. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a big factor in an insurance-based practice. We kind of have a formula in our business that for every 5 to 8 revenue-producing staff, it justifies 1 support staff.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
We really try to operate from a lean perspective, and so our office staff is very light. I think we have 5.5 people for 80 people. Mm-hmm. So we could easily have 10, but then again, you have to kind of weigh, do you want to teach the 5 people how to implement very structured and systematized processes and work with the 5, or do you want to hire double the amount of people? And personally, I would rather have less people, because I think in this type of business, the people are the hardest thing to manage. The other stuff's easy. You get 10 personalities, you're going to have twice as many problems as you would with 5.
Right. So
that's kind of my way of thinking.
Yeah, and what we'll do, Kasey, is I'll put in the show notes maybe some links to like that ebook. Okay. I know as soon as we get off of here, I'm going to get that, because that's just kind of the thing that just I know you and I have, but and it might have been you that I learned about profit first.
Really?
Yeah. So listening to you, and an exciting thing is that Mike Michalowicz is going to be on my podcast here later this month, and but that was, I know when I read that book, it really got me to think about my numbers differently, and also just quit hiding my head in the sand about the numbers. And I think that's exactly what we do. And have been guilty of it myself, is that we just kind of look at that, but don't really understand the cash flow. Right. And that's, and especially, where in the same way, I'm an insurance-based practice as well. And, when you bring on a new therapist, there's a delay time before you can actually reap the benefit of that therapist actually bringing in income.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, definitely, I'm so excited that Mike is going to be on the podcast. I'm secretly kind of obsessed with him and his work.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'll definitely be listening to that. But, there was a point in 2017, we had some administrative issues in our group, and we had a few of our administrative team kind of go rogue on us and decide that, hey, this is pretty easy. I'll just go do my own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that happens more than what I realized. But at that point, when I started realizing there was some cash flow, like I really didn't understand my cash flow as much as I should. I bought about 5 books, Profit First being one of them, and I took off to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and rented a cabin for the weekend with my dog. And I read Profit First, and then that was actually the only book I ended up reading because I read it about 3 times.
Wow.
And it was like a light bulb went off. And I came home and I totally changed how I totally changed my financial system. And I'm telling you what, I mean, the difference it has made in my company and just my sanity and not having to worry about, having one account that we have 100 things going in and out of every single day has just made so much different. I can't even begin to.
Right. Yeah. I was going to ask you, how closely do you follow his system?
Very strict.
Okay.
I made that decision. I've modified it just a little bit that works a little better with a mental health type business. But when I set those allocation percentages and I set my my TAPs and my caps, that's what I use, and I don't vary from it. And it's kind of cool because for my billing team, we have the account that's your income account that all of your money is coming into. And so I can tell them, hey, our goal is $90,000 this pay period, and I don't have to tell them anything else. And they know based on what they're billing out if they're going to meet that goal. And then I can offer them different AR bonuses based off of that goal.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you and I are going to have to talk some more because one of the things that I'm kind of working on, and I haven't really put this out here on the airwaves, so to speak, but one of the things I want to put together is just a financial management course for therapists, because that is something that is absolutely the place where therapists struggle the most, is that they, none of us receives training on how to manage money or finances unless you just happen to take a course in that, as an undergraduate or a graduate. And so, knowing how to manage your money and really thinking about, I think it's, amassing wealth is not a bad thing because that gives you a cushion. But really what most of us need to be most concerned about is our cash flow, and does our cash flow support our lifestyle or the lifestyle we want to have?
Absolutely.
So,
yeah. I think that's a great idea. I think, people ask me all the time about processes and systems, but if you think about it, ultimately, what's the point of your processes and systems is for profitability. Like, what's the point of having them if you can't make a profit off of your business? And so I get a lot of questions, and I think that course would be a great idea. I know Practice of the Practice is going to do I think it's a quick 30-day cleanup course on financials. It's not necessarily like teaching what you're talking about, but it's more of like, are you in a mess? Here, let's help you get your feet under you.
Yeah.
So I think that might be helpful too for some people.
Right. Yeah. Well, this is just exciting stuff. So, Kasey, what else would you say for the people listening would be something that they could think about as if they're thinking about getting ready to scale or grow their practice or maybe go from solo to group practice? What would be some things that they need to have their eye on?
I think a big question is your lifestyle. Like, what are you willing to compromise? What are you not? Because when you go into a group practice, especially in the beginning, I mean, you're going to endure a lot more work. It's just going to happen. So for me, I was willing to make that sacrifice while I was younger and could afford to make that sacrifice because I thought it's going to be worth it for me later. So that would definitely be one thing. Are you in a position to outsource help? I know, like for me, I couldn't. I had just had a baby. I had been on bed rest for almost 6 months. I'd been out of work for 9 months. I had nothing, nothing. And so I couldn't hire a consultant, or I couldn't do a lot of the things that, most people can do. And I had to just bootstrap it. Like you said, I had to figure it out. So are you in a position that you can outsource some help if you don't have the time? That would be a good question. I think another thing too, and I just realized this when I was at Slowdown School a couple of weeks ago, I went into consulting focusing on processes and systems, and that is 100% my focus with consulting. But at the same time, I realized that there are so many therapists that have an idea that goes beyond just their private practice. And some of them are wanting to be public speakers. They're wanting to create online courses. They're wanting to do podcasts. Like, they want to do all of these things, but their practice is not in a position to support financially them to back out and start to work on their big ideas. And so one of the things that I'm really focusing on is how I can help therapists get that practice stable and strong and profitable, so that then they have the option, if they want to go start a new program or start another business, that they can do that. And, I don't know. I guess another thing too, just like, don't overthink it. If it's something you want to do, just do it. And, just do it. And don't spend too much time wallowing in it.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is just, I'm one of the things that I guess too, is knowing it is to stick with just one or two things. One of the things that I struggle with the most is what I refer to as shiny object syndrome.
Yeah.
And then I listen to a lot of podcasts and I get a lot of big ideas. But I think the thing that I've had to learn is, just if you find an idea or you find something that you're interested in, is number one is bounce it off somebody else, to talk to somebody else about it. Because I think a lot of times in our own minds, we can think, oh, wow, this is a really great idea. But then when you really jump into it, you're thinking, wow, this really doesn't work. And so you have to back off, and then you're discouraged and all that sort of thing. And so, but I think
and I think that's true. I hear a lot of people say that, especially therapists. I don't know if it's just a therapist thing or what, but just for me, I mean, right now in my life and in my career, my practice is always going to come first, because that's what I rely on financially to support my family. So giving the attention to the thing that is your fundamental payer, or your fundamental backbone, whatever you want to call it, like taking care of that first, and then doing your fun thing or your big idea after. I think is a big
right. Well, I think I did too, and you've kind of hit around this idea, and it's something again that people hear from me a lot is really knowing your why. Why would you want to do what you do? Why would you want to be in private practice? Why would you want to do what you've done in terms of just really grow, building a wonderful practice that employs a lot of people? Is really kind of having that hard talk with yourself and being brutally honest with yourself about what you really want. And I think at the end of the day, all of us, we want to spend time with our families. We want to be able to have a decent place to live. We want to be able to go out to eat without having to worry about the picking up the check and all of those things. And I think that's what I've been just thinking about a lot here lately. And the other thing that strikes me about you, Kasey, is that you're just really having a lot of fun doing this. And that is so important. If it's not fun, it's not worth doing.
Yes, very much. And you have to make it fun, even if it's not naturally fun, or else you're just going to go crazy. So. That's a big theme for me here lately. I was just thinking all about that this morning. I've tried to get back into some better habits, and I'm doing some more walking again, and so listening and pondering and all that sort of thing. So So I don't know. I think a lot of people they lose that why because of the logistics of the day-to-day work. This field can be very profitable. You can make a very good living for yourself. You could put your kids through college. And I think a lot of people, especially in my experience, not necessarily clinical people or therapists, but when you get admin people that come in that have no clinical knowledge or no background, just high school diplomas, and they're in there working and they're seeing these numbers and they're like, wow, like I can make a killing off of this. And and then they go into it, and then they get a year, 6 months, a year down the road, and then they can't figure out why their business isn't flourishing. And I think the people that really carry that why and just believe in that purpose, and I mean, that's just my personal opinion. I just think you're always going to have success, because if you're doing what you love and you're living your purpose, I think you're always going to be rewarded for it.
Exactly. I was just, again, I was thinking this morning, I think since I went into private practice, I really kind of made the jump into full-time private practice. There hasn't been a day yet that I haven't looked forward to going in and just doing this work. And so I think, and if it ever gets to the point where I dread going in or dread coming in, it's time for me to, like you said, go back and look at my why and get grounded in that.
Yeah. Totally agree.
Yeah. So Kasey, I don't want to, I'm aware of our time and just making sure that I don't use up too much of your time. So if people need to get in touch with you or want to get in touch with you, what's the best way and how can they reach out to you?
Okay. I have recently been working on making that a little easier. I think I have like 8 email addresses. So I've tried to condense them all down to one. So probably the easiest email address would just be hello@consultwithkc.com. That's probably the easiest.
Okay.
I have a website that's being built. So I would say by the time you air this podcast, it will be live and ready. And it is just consultwithkc.com. And, I have links directly on there. They can call. They can, has my phone number. It has the email address, Facebook page, all that stuff.
Right. Okay. Well, good. I'll put all that in the show notes and tell folks the name of your practice and where you're located.
Yeah, we are Mindsight, MINDSIGHT. I know I have an accent, so I have to spell it so people can understand what
I understood you perfectly.
So we're Mindsight Behavioral Group, and we are in Kentucky. We have 6 physical office locations. We're in Somerset is our administrative office. We have an office in Barberville, Kentucky, London, Kentucky, Danville, Kentucky, Richmond, Kentucky, and Campbellsville, Kentucky. So we are expanding throughout the state.
Yeah, that's great. And Kasey and I were talking earlier just that we're practically neighbors where I'm located in Northeast Tennessee in the Tri-Cities area, where I was telling her that I drove through, that her part of Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky. So we're both Appalachian in that sense.
That's why we talk the way we do.
Yeah. Well, you don't have an accent as far as I'm concerned.
You don't think so?
No. No, I'm deaf to it if I do have it. If you do have it.
Well, People tell me all the time that's all I heard about at in Michigan a couple weeks ago.
Oh, yeah. No, they're the ones that have an accent.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Well, Kasey, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm so, this is just a thrill for me, and I hope that we'll do it again here soon. And I'm sure I'm going to be reaching out to you to help me with this financial course I'm thinking about and beginning to kind of pull together. So
I would love that. Yeah. Just let me know.
Okay. Well, take care.
Thank you so much. See ya.
Bye-bye. I always feel so privileged to be able to do this podcast, and am so thankful to those of you out there that listen to the podcast and are following me here at the Practice of Therapy. And the greatest thing about this job or this endeavor that I'm on is being able to talk with people just like Kasey and being able to learn from them and really just kind of getting to know them as friends and developing this camaraderie and developing, just friendships that are turning out to be longtime friendships. And so, again, I'm thankful to Kasey for being able to join the podcast and being part of this. If you'll take a look at the show notes, again, you'll see Kasey's information there and can get to know her better. And I've got a link in the show notes for her book. In fact, as a matter of fact, as I said in the podcast, as soon as I got through recording, I did download her book on Kindle through Amazon, and I'll have a link for that there. If you are thinking about growing your practice and feeling stuck, I would love to have you be part of the mastermind group that I'm starting. Depending on when you're listening to this, I'll be starting it the first week of September. I'm recording this about midway through August. So hopefully those of you that get to hear this early on will have an opportunity to apply to the mastermind group. And what it entails is just being able to first have you and I having a conversation about where you are in your practice and what you feel like your struggle areas are. And love to have you be a part of that. It's starting to fill up. I'm starting to fill the slots. So not to create too much of a sense of urgency, but I think this group's going to fill up here shortly. Thanks again for listening to the podcast, and do go over to iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play or wherever you might be listening to the podcast and subscribe, and take the time to give it a rating as well and leave your comments. I so appreciate that. And that gives me honest feedback about the podcast and helps me affirm that what I'm doing is the right thing. So take care, folks, and we'll talk with you next time. You have been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. If you haven't already, please sign up to receive the free Private Practice Startup Guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.